Section 9.6, Solving Rational Equations. Here's the procedure I want you to use on your assignments when solving for rational equations. I want you to factor the denominator if needed. I want you to find the LCD of the entire equation. I want to multiply both sides of the equation by the LCD, and then simplify both sides. Solve the equation as usual. The remaining slides will be examples of my topic. Here I want to solve each equation. I want to determine if I need to factor the denominators, and here I don't. Therefore, I can find the LCD. And the LCD of both sides of the equation is going to be 8. Now, I'll distribute 8 through each term on each side. 8 times x minus 6 will give me 8 divided by 4, which is going to give me 2 times the quantity of x minus 6. 8 times x is 8x divided by 2 will leave me with 4x. Now solve the equation like this, like I've done many, many times. I'll distribute, gives me 2x minus 12 equals 4x. Subtract 2 on both sides. Negative 12 equals 2x. Divide by 2, and I get x equal to a negative 6. Now I can plug that back into the original equation to verify. Negative 6 minus 6 is a negative 12. A negative 12 divided by 4 is a negative 3. And a negative 6 divided by 2 is a negative 3. So therefore, that is true. On my next example, 2 over 7y equals 2 over 3y. I find a least common denominator. That will be 21y. And when I multiply across each term on each side, I'm going to get 42y divided by 7y, which will leave me with 6. And 21y times 2 is 42y, divided by 3y will leave me with 14. Notice my y's cancel out, and that leaves me with a solution of 6 equals 14, which we know is false. Therefore, there is no solution. Next, 2 over 3x plus 1 over 2 equals 3 over 4x. Nothing to factor in my denominator, but I can determine my least common denominator to be 12x. Now I'm just going to distribute through each term on each side. 12x times 2 is 24x. 24x divided by 3x is going to give me 8. 12x times 1 is 12x divided by 2 leaves me with 6x. And 12x times 3 is 36x. 36x divided by 4x leaves me with 9. Now solving the equation, that leaves me 6x equal to 1, or x equals 1/6 when I divide both sides by 6. When I substitute back in, I get a statement that is true, therefore 1/6 is my solution. In my next example, I have 6 minus 2 over x equals a negative 5 over x minus 3. Again, I don't need to factor my denominator. Therefore, I will find a least common denominator. In this case, it will be x times x minus 3. And I'll distribute through each term on each side. This gives me 6 times 1x, so 6x times x minus 3. And that is over 1, so I don't need to put that over anything. A negative 2 times 1 is a negative 2x times x minus 3 over x. And finally, a negative 5 times 1 is a negative 5x times x minus 3 over x minus 3. Now, we could have simplified in our heads, but I want to show you how this would look. That gives me, when I bring everything down and simplify, 6x times x minus 3. The x's will cancel. Gives me a negative 2 times x minus 3. And the x minus 3's cancel. And that leaves me with a negative 5x. Now we want to solve the equation. Let's distribute. That gives me 6x squared minus 18x minus 2x plus 6 equals a negative 5x. And I'm going to set to 0. Since this is a quadratic, that's going to give me 6x squared minus 20x when I simplify. Bring over the 5x, that's minus 20x plus 5x is a minus 15x plus 6. And that reset to 0. Now I can factor my quadratic. And when I do, I'm going to break this into 6x and 1x. And then I'll break this into 3 and 2. And since this is a minus, that'll be a minus 3 minus 2. That will give me a negative 12 minus 3, which is a negative 15x. But a negative times a negative is a positive 6. Now, each quantity can be set to 0. 6x minus 3 equals 0. And when I solve that, x is going to equal 1/2. And x minus 2 equals 0. And when I solve that, x equals 2. And when I plug in 1/2 back into my original equation, I get 2 equals 2. And when I plug in 2 into my original equation, I get 5 equals 5. Therefore, each are solutions of my equation. My next example, again, I don't need to factor, but I can find my common denominator. In this case, it will be x times x minus 2. And when I distribute that through each term on each side, I'm going to get the x's to cancel out, which will leave me 4 times x minus 2. And here the x minus 2 will cancel out, and that will leave me with, solving the equation, 4x minus 8 equals 8, 4x equals 16, and x equals 4. And when I substitute 4 back into the original, 4 divided by 4, I get 1, equals 8 over 4 minus 2 is 2, 8 divided by 2 is 4. This is a false statement, therefore there are no solutions. Next, I have 2 over x plus 2 equals 8 over x plus 4. Again, no factoring, but I do have a least common denominator of x plus 2 and x plus 4. And when I distribute through each term on each side, the x plus 2's cancel, and that will leave me 2 times x plus 4. And when I distribute through on the next term, the x plus 4's will cancel, and that will leave me 8 times x plus 2. Let's solve the equation. We'll distribute 2x plus 8 equals 8x plus 16. That gives me 6x plus 16 equals 8. Subtract 16 on both sides, I get a negative 8 equals 6x. And when I divide by 6, I'm going to get a negative 8/6. But we know that will simplify to be a negative 4/3. And when I substitute a negative 4/3 into each side of the equation, I'm going to get 3 equals 3, which is true. Therefore, a negative 4/3 is a solution to my equation. On my next example, I need to do some factoring in my denominator. Let's start by bringing down 2 over x plus 2 equals x over x minus 2. And then I'm going to want to flip this around on the bottom. I want to flip the 4 and the x squared around. To do that, I'm going to factor out a negative. And when I factor out a negative, that will give me x squared minus 4. So if I distributed that back through, positive times a negative would give me a negative x squared. And then I would have a negative times a negative, which would give me a positive 4. Now what I want to do is to continue factoring. So I'm going to have 2 over x plus 2 equals x over x minus 2. And then I'm going to factor the denominator of this fraction, which is going to give me a difference of squares of x plus 2, x minus 2. Now I have my LCD, and my least common denominator is x plus 2, x minus 2. And I'm going to distribute that through each term on each side. So the product of x plus 2, x minus 2. So my first term, x plus 2 will cancel, and I'll be left with 2 times x minus 2 equals, this term, the x minus 2 will cancel, and I'll have x times x plus 2. And my last term, the x plus 2 and x minus 2 will cancel out altogether, leaving me with a negative 13. Now I'll distribute, which will give me 2x minus 4 equals x squared plus 2x minus 13. That's going to set me up with a quadratic. I'm going to set the 0. So 0 equals x squared. Subtract 2x on both sides. That will cancel. And I'll add 4 on both sides. That'll give me a minus 9. Now I'll factor that into a difference of squares. X plus 3, x minus 3. And then I set each to 0. X plus 3 equals 0, or x equals a negative 3. And my next one, x minus 3 equals 0, x equals 3. Let's check our solutions. When I substitute a negative 3 in, I'm going to get a negative 2 equals a negative 2, and that is true. So negative 3 is a solution. When I substitute 3 in, I'll get 2/5 equals 2/5. And that also is true, and therefore a negative 3 and 3 are both solutions of the equation. In my next example, I need to factor the denominator. So I'll bring down my x over 3x plus 2 doesn't factor, so I'll just bring that down. Plus, I have x plus 3. This denominator does factor. I'll factor out a 2. That gives me x minus 2 equals negative 2x over 2 sets of parentheses. 3x squared will break up into 3x and x. And I can break up my negative 4 into a plus 2 minus 2. That gives me a negative 6 plus 2, which is a negative 4x. And a positive 2 times a negative 2 is a negative 4. From here, I can find my common denominator, which will be 2, 3x plus 2, times 3 times x minus 2. Then I can distribute through each term on each side. 2 times the quantity of 3x plus 2 times the quantity of x minus 2. On my first one, the 3x plus 2 will cancel. That'll leave me with 2x. 2 times x is 2x times x minus 2. The 2x minus 2 will cancel. That will leave me with x plus 3 times 3x plus 2 equals, and here the 3x plus 2 and the x minus 2 will cancel, leaving me with 2 times a negative 2x, which will give me 2 times a negative 2x. Now I'm going to have to distribute and FOIL to simplify the equation. That's going to give me 2x squared minus 4x. I'll FOIL here, plus 3 times 3x is 3x squared, plus 2x, plus 9x, plus 6 equals a negative 4x. I'm going to simplify. That's going to give me 5x squared, 2x plus 3x squared, 2x squared plus 3x squared. Negative 4x plus 2x is a negative 2x. A negative 2x plus 9x is a positive 7x. plus 6 equals a negative 4x. It's a quadratic. I'll set to 0. That gives me 5x squared. Add 4x to both sides, plus 11x plus 6 equals 0. Now I need to factor this trinomial. That will give me 5x times x is 5x squared. And I'll break up 6 into be plus 6 plus 1. That equals 0. That will give me 5x times x is 5x squared. 5x plus 6x is 11x, and 6 times 1 is 6. Now what I can do is set each quantity to 0. That gives me 5x plus 6 equal to 0. And when I solve that for x will equal a negative 6/5. And the next one I have x plus 1 equals 0. And when I solve that, that'll give me x equal to a negative 1. And if I would substitute these values back into the original equation, they would both turn out to be true. Therefore, they are solutions of our equation. Our next example, the perimeter of a triangle is 24 centimeters. Side C of the triangle is 2 centimeters longer than side A. Side B is 3/5 as long as side C. What are the lengths of the 3 sides of the triangle? What we first need to determine is what are the 3 things we're talking about. We're talking about side A, the length of side A, the length of side B, and the length of side C. Of those 3, I need to determine what I know least about. And in this problem, side C of the triangle is 2 centimeters longer than A. Side B is 3/5 as long as C. I actually know nothing about A, so therefore I will let that be x. And then I know side C is 2 centimeters longer than A. A is x, so C is x plus 2. And it states that side B is 3/5 as long as side C. Side C is x plus 2, so B is 3/5 x plus 2. And of course, we know how to determine the perimeter of a triangle is just add up the lengths of the sides, and the perimeter is given to me. Therefore, I can set up an equation, x plus 3/5 x plus 2 plus x plus 2 equals the perimeter, which is 24. Now I'll simplify. I'll distribute. That gives me x plus 3/5 x plus 6/5 plus x plus 2 equals 24. Now I need to combine like terms. I have x plus x, which is 2x. Getting a common denominator of 5 gives me 10/5 x. When I add to 3/5, that gives me 13/5 x plus 6/5 plus 2. 2 with a common denominator of 5 is going to give me 10/5 plus 6/5 is going to give me 16/5 equals 24. I'm going to subtract 16/5 on both sides. That gives me 13/5 equal to 24 with a common denominator of 5 is going to be 125 minus 16/5 is going to be 104/5. Multiplying both sides by 5/13 gives me a value of x to be 8. Going back to my values, I know A is equal to x, therefore x is equal to 8 centimeters. So A is 8 centimeters. C, 8 plus 2, 10 centimeters. And I have 10 times 3/5. 10 divided by 5 is 2, times 3 equals 6 centimeters. On our last example, I have the librarian reports that $940 of the total book allowance for the 3 classes in the school has been spent. Class A spent 1/3 of the total allowance, Class B 1/4, and Class C 1/5. How much of a book allowance is left? Well, the one thing I don't know is what is the original book allowance. So I'm going to let X equal the book allowance. And I know I spent 940 of it. It's also given how much each class spent. Class A spent 1/3 of the total book allowance, 1/3 of X. Class B spent 1/4 of the total book allowance, and Class C spent 1/5. Therefore, if I add up how much each spent, that would be and that would equal 940. Now I'm going to solve this as I did all the problems in this section. I'm going to find a common denominator. And in this case, the common denominator is 60. And then I'll distribute 60 through each term on each side. And when I do, that's going to give me 20x plus 15x plus 12x, and 60 times 940 is going to be 56,400. Combining like terms on the left, I'm going to get 47x equals 56,400. And when I solve, I get x to equal $1,200. So the total allowance for the 3 schools is $1,200. But they want to know is how much is left. So we have a total allowance of $1,200, and we spent $940. Therefore, we have a remaining balance of $260 to spend on books.